My boss used my personal tragedy as a motivational story without my permission. I'm furious. My hands are still shaking as I write this. I just got home from a company-wide meeting where something unbelievable happened. My boss stood on stage in front of everyone, hundreds of employees, and told a motivational story. The story was about me. Specifically, it was about the worst thing I've ever gone through in my life. He used my personal tragedy as an inspirational anecdote for the company. And he did it without my permission. I'm beyond furious and hurt right now, and I need to get this out. To give some context, I went through a devastating loss about 6 months ago. My husband and I were expecting our first child after years of trying. I was 8 months pregnant, and we were over the moon excited to meet our baby girl, but life can be cruel. I ended up having a stillbirth. We lost our daughter before we even got to hold her alive. It shattered me completely. I spiraled into one of the darkest places imaginable. I took a 3-month leave from work to grieve and just survive each day. It's not the kind of pain you just get over. It still hurts every single day. When I finally returned to work, I was a ghost of myself. I only came back because I needed some normalcy and distraction, and frankly, because we need the income. Only a few close colleagues knew what exactly had happened. Of course, management and HR knew why I was on leave, but I explicitly asked them to keep it confidential. I'm a very private person, and this tragedy was raw and deeply personal. My boss at the time, let's call him Dave, expressed condolences in private when I came back. He even gave me a hug and said if I needed anything to let him know. Importantly, he promised me he wouldn't bring it up or draw attention to it at work. I trusted him to keep his word. Fast forward to today, we had a quarterly all-hands meeting this morning. I was sitting near the middle of the auditorium, barely paying attention. My mind was wandering, thinking about what projects I needed to finish before the weekend. Then I heard Dave say something on stage like, "We all face personal challenges at times, but it's about how we overcome them and continue striving for excellence." That caught my ear, but I still didn't think it had anything to do with me. I figured he was speaking in general platitudes, as bosses do. But then he continued, and I realized with growing dread that he was telling my story. He started describing a team member who faced a heartbreaking personal loss, but showed incredible resilience by returning to work with determination and a positive attitude. My stomach dropped. At first I thought, surely he's not talking about me. I remember the exact moment it clicked. He looked directly at me in the audience as he said, "And she's sitting right there." Then he actually said, "My name. My name." "Jane's story really shows us what strength looks like," he announced, smiling as if he was proud of me. I felt hundreds of pairs of eyes swivel toward me. In that moment, I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I froze. I could feel my face burning as blood rushed to my cheeks. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out part of what he was saying. I think my vision even blurred for a second from the shock. I could not believe he was doing this. I cannot adequately explain the mix of emotions that hit me all at once. I was mortified that he just broadcast my personal trauma to the entire company. I was angry that he turned my tragedy into a cheap motivational story without even asking me. And I felt betrayed because he had explicitly promised to keep it private. It was humiliation and fury and grief, all twisting together inside me. Meanwhile, Dave went on speaking, completely oblivious to my horrified expression. He was still going on about how I persevered through pain and how I'm an example of dedication and strength to the company. I could barely hear the rest over the rushing sound in my ears. I saw a few people around me clapping softly, and some giving me these awkward, sympathetic looks. I just stared down at my hands, gripping my pen, knuckles white, trying to process. I felt a tear slip out, and quickly wiped it away. I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break down in that moment. The meeting wrapped up maybe 2 or 3 minutes after that, though it felt like an eternity. The second it was over, I practically bolted out of my seat and headed for the exit. I needed to get out of there immediately. I heard a couple of coworkers calling after me like, "Jane, wait up," but I ignored them. I think I was on the verge of either screaming or sobbing, and I didn't trust myself to hold it in much longer. I ended up in the women's restroom down the hall, locked in a stall. My whole body was trembling. I was so upset I felt nauseous. I kept replaying the moment in my head, hearing his voice saying my name and telling everyone about my baby as if it were some inspiring anecdote. My baby's death was being used as office small talk. I finally just burst into tears, quietly as I could, there in that bathroom stall. A few minutes later, I heard the door open and a familiar voice calling my name gently. It was my close friend at work, Laura. She must have seen me run out and came to check on me. I unlocked the stall, and as soon as I saw her face, I just broke down all over again, harder. Laura hugged me tight while I sobbed into her shoulder. When I could finally speak, the first thing I said was, "I can't believe he did that to me." Laura was furious on my behalf. She kept saying things like, "That was completely out of line," and "What the hell was he thinking?" She told me that after I rushed out, the room was kind of silent and awkward. Apparently Dave even chuckled and said something like, "I hope Jane doesn't mind me sharing that story, but it's just so inspiring." Hearing that secondhand made me livid all over again. I hope I don't mind? He knew damn well I would mind, or at least any sane person would realize you should ask before sharing something so personal. Laura helped me get composed enough to leave the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. My eyes were red and swollen, but at least I wasn't actively crying anymore. Now I was just angry. You know that kind of anger where you've cried all your tears out and all that's left is fiery rage? That's where I was. I knew I wouldn't be able to move on with my day until I confronted Dave about this. Laura, still fuming, urged me to report the incident. She said she would back me up to HR as a witness to exactly what was said in the meeting. I agreed wholeheartedly. I already knew I planned to report it. On the way to his office, I had to walk through the halls where other employees were milling about after the meeting. It was torture. I got sympathetic looks left and right. A few people approached me gently, like one guy from IT whom I barely know came up and said, "Hey, I'm so sorry for what you went through. If you ever need anything, let me know." I know people meant well, but in that moment I just couldn't. My private tragedy had become the water cooler topic of the day, and everyone felt a need to say something. I just forced a tight smile and said, "Thanks, I appreciate it," and hurried past. One coworker, who didn't know about my loss before, started to ask me, "I'm sorry, I didn't catch. What exactly happened?" I cut her off with, "I really don't want to talk about it right now, sorry," and kept walking. She looked a bit taken aback, maybe thinking I was rude, but I didn't care. I couldn't handle explaining it to someone in the middle of the hallway. Not at work, not like this. I finally reached Dave's office area. He was standing outside his door chatting with a couple of other managers. They all turned to look at me as I approached. I'm sure I looked upset because their conversation trailed off and they got a bit quiet. Without preamble, I said directly to him, voice tight, "We need to talk. Now." To his credit, Dave at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. He dismissed the other managers, telling them we'd catch up later, and ushered me into his office, closing the door behind us. I didn't even wait for him to fully turn around before I started in. The moment the door shut, I snapped, "How could you do that to me?" My voice was shaking with rage and leftover tears. He looked caught off guard, like he hadn't expected me to be that upset. "Really?" He held up his hands defensively and went, Hey, I only shared it because it was such a powerful story," or something along those lines. That just made me angrier. I told him in no uncertain terms that he had no right to share anything about my stillbirth or my leave, especially not in a public forum like that. I said it was completely out of line, disrespectful, and cruel. I remember practically yelling, "You took the worst experience of my life and turned it into a motivational stunt. Do you have any idea how violated I feel right now? That was not your story to tell." He immediately started trying to defend himself. Of course he did. He said he was just sharing a story of perseverance to encourage others, and that he only shared it because he was proud of how I handled things. He actually had the gall to frame it like he was honoring me. I think he even said, "I was trying to honor your strength." I cut him off. Honoring me? By exposing my personal pain to everyone? You promised me you'd keep it private. I was practically shaking a finger at him. He had the nerve to shrug and say, "I didn't go into any graphic details. I kept it respectful." As if avoiding the word stillbirth or not mentioning the baby's name makes it okay to use my tragedy in a speech. The specific detail isn't the point. Acknowledging it at all, in any form, in front of all those people was the problem. I told him exactly that it wasn't his place to mention it in any way. Private means private. What he did was a breach of trust and basic decency. He still looked defensive. His tone got a little stiff, like he was getting annoyed with me for not seeing his side. He said, "I honestly thought you'd be okay with it, since you're doing better now." I think my jaw literally dropped when he said that. I saw red. Doing better now? I will never be okay with what happened to me. And even if I seem fine at work, it doesn't mean I want my personal loss paraded around. I could feel my voice getting louder and my face getting hot again. He finally seemed to soften a bit at my obvious distress. He muttered, "I'm sorry if it upset you. That wasn't my intention." God, that apology felt so half-assed. If it upset me? I told him straight up that of course it upset me. What did he expect? I said something like, "What did you think would happen when you blindsided me like that in front of everyone? Were you even going to tell me beforehand? Or just, hope I'd be fine with it?" He kind of stammered then, saying he maybe should have given me a heads up, and he meant well. At that point I was done hearing it. I told him this conversation wasn't over, but I was too angry to continue calmly. I also made it clear I'd be talking to HR about this. That seemed to take him aback. His eyes widened a bit. I left his office before I said something in anger that I couldn't take back. I was at my limit. As I stormed out, I heard him start to say my name like, "Jane, wait," but I was already in the hallway by then. I didn't want to listen to any more excuses. I went straight to my desk, hands still trembling, and grabbed my bag, then shut down my computer. A couple of teammates nearby looked at me with concern. One of them started to ask if I was okay, opening his mouth and raising a hand slightly, but I just mumbled, "I need to go," without making eye contact. I think my voice cracked. He just nodded and stepped back, thankfully not pressing the issue. I think everyone could tell I was in no state to talk. In the elevator on the way down to the lobby, I allowed myself a few more tears of frustration. On the elevator ride down, I saw my phone light up with a couple of notifications, likely more Slack messages or texts from colleagues offering condolences or asking if I was okay. I couldn't bear to read them right then. I shoved my phone into my bag and closed my eyes, focusing on taking deep breaths. The mix of anger and humiliation was just overwhelming. By the time I reached the ground floor, I was numb and exhausted. Now I'm home, sitting on my couch, and the more I replay it in my head, the angrier I get. This was a complete betrayal. I trusted him as my boss and as a basic human being to keep my confidence. Instead, he violated that trust in the most public way possible. I feel so exposed, like my pain isn't mine anymore. It's some story for people to gawk at or clap for. Meanwhile, he gets to pat himself on the back for sharing an inspirational tale and move on with his day. I told my husband what happened as soon as I got home. He knew about the meeting, and I had texted him that something was wrong. He was livid. He actually cursed out loud for a solid minute, calling Dave all kinds of unflattering names. He asked if he should come down to my office and chew him out in person, or even talk to a lawyer. I had to convince him not to do anything rash. As angry as I am, I don't want to make this an even bigger spectacle. The last thing I need is more drama at work, but my husband's outrage at least validated that I'm not overreacting or crazy for feeling this way. He knows how much pain I'm still in, and he was furious that Dave would treat it so lightly. I have already drafted an email to HR detailing what happened and how upset I am. I wrote down everything I could remember Dave saying, how it made me feel, and reminded them that I had explicitly asked for privacy regarding my leave. I haven't sent it yet because I wanted to cool down and proofread it when I'm a bit calmer, to make sure it's professional and clear. But I intend to send it first thing tomorrow morning. I don't know what HR will do, if anything. At the very least, I want this incident formally documented. What Dave did might not break a specific law. I'm honestly not sure, but it surely violates our company's values around respect and privacy. It definitely created a hostile work environment for me today. I don't even feel safe or respected there right now. I also have this nagging worry about retaliation. Dave is pretty high up, the head of our department. If I piss him off by reporting this, could he make my work life hell or try to push me out? He's been at the company for a decade and has a lot of influence. Part of me doesn't even want to go back to that office anyway after this. But another part of me is stubborn and doesn't want to quit when I've done nothing wrong. I actually liked my job, or at least I did before all this, and I'm good at it. I shouldn't have to leave because my boss decided to violate my privacy. I'm at a loss right now. I feel angry and hurt and kind of raw. I keep flashing back to that moment, all those eyes on me when he mentioned my story, and I feel sick to my stomach all over again. This wasn't his story to share, especially not in a room full of colleagues for a cheap round of applause. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'll update if I can, but right now I just needed to vent and maybe get some outside perspective. Am I overreacting here? I really truly don't think I am. What he did was such a violation of my trust and my privacy. I have every right to be furious, right? Update 1, a few days later. First off, I want to say thank you so much for the outpouring of support and advice on my original post. I was in such a bad place that day, and reading your comments later really helped validate my feelings. I wasn't able to respond to everyone, but I read every single comment and message. It meant a lot, truly. It's been a few days, and I have some updates on the situation with my boss Dave and HR. The morning after that all-hands meeting, I sent the email to HR as planned. To be honest, I hardly slept the night before. I was anxious about how it would all play out, but I knew I had to follow through. HR got back to me pretty quickly. By midday, I had a meeting scheduled with an HR representative, let's call her Maria, and Dave for the following day. I was a bundle of nerves leading up to that meeting. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a mediation session or what. Some of you warned that HR ultimately works to protect the company and therefore Dave as a manager, so I tried to prepare myself for a potentially frustrating outcome. Before the joint meeting, Maria from HR spoke with me one-on-one. She said she received my email and was sorry I had gone through that experience. She actually used the words, "That was inappropriate of him," which made me feel heard. She asked me to recount in my own words what happened, which I did, tears and all. Maria was supportive. She kept nodding and taking notes. She asked if I felt comfortable sitting down with Dave to discuss it, or if I wanted her to handle it separately. I said I was willing to talk in front of him, because I frankly wanted him to hear how upset I was in a controlled setting, and I had already sort of unloaded on him the day of, albeit less calmly. So later that afternoon, we had the meeting. I was in a conference room with HR and Dave. The tension was palpable when he walked in. He looked a bit nervous, which I quietly relished. He should be. HR basically said we were there to discuss the incident at the meeting, and that she wanted to make sure we were all on the same page about respecting personal boundaries. I won't recount everything word for word, but the summary is, Dave did apologize, this time in a more straightforward way. He said, "I'm very sorry for mentioning your personal story in the meeting. I realize now that I should have asked you first, or, better yet, not brought it up at all. I never meant to cause you distress." I sat there stone-faced as he spoke. When he was done, HR looked to me to respond. I took a deep breath and told him exactly how I felt. I was calmer than last time, but I made it clear that what he did was a huge breach of trust, and that it did cause me a lot of distress. I told him I'm still grieving, and that having my loss discussed in a room full of coworkers was humiliating and deeply upsetting. My voice did waver at one point when I mentioned my daughter. Maria passed me a tissue. I saw Dave wince slightly, like he felt uncomfortable. Well, good. He should feel a fraction of what I felt. He apologized again and said he understood. I responded that I hoped he truly did understand so that nothing like this happens again to me or anyone else. I also mentioned that I had explicitly asked for privacy and he had promised it, which he acknowledged. HR was mostly quiet during this exchange, just facilitating. She eventually piped up to say something like, "I'm glad we're talking this through. It's important that going forward we all recognize where the boundaries are. Personal matters should be kept personal unless an employee wants to share." Dave nodded along. In the end, Dave agreed, or was instructed, to send out a brief note to the team clarifying that personal stories shouldn't be shared without consent. I'm not sure if that was more for legal cover or a genuine educational thing, but he did it. The next day, he emailed the department a generic message that said, "I'd like to remind everyone that we should respect each other's privacy. I shared a personal story about a team member recently without their permission, and I regret it. I've apologized to them. Please learn from my mistake and always consider others' privacy before sharing personal information." Reading that email was a bit surreal for me. He didn't mention me by name in the email, thank goodness, but of course everyone knew it was about what happened with my story. It was embarrassing in a way to have it acknowledged again, yet I appreciated that it was at least an admission of wrongdoing on his part. A couple of colleagues who know me well checked in after that email to make sure I was okay. I told them I was managing. So does this mean everything is fine now? Well, not exactly. While I'm relieved that HR took it seriously and that I got a sincere apology, albeit prompted by HR, things are still a bit tense at work. For one, my relationship with Dave has understandably changed. He has been keeping interactions with me strictly professional and somewhat distant. That's fine by me. I have zero desire to make small talk with him anyway. But I can't shake the feeling that he's now walking on eggshells around me. Or possibly that he's a bit resentful that I went to HR, or both. Yesterday, I needed his approval on a project timeline. A fairly routine sign-off. In the past, he'd just give me quick verbal feedback or a thumbs up. This time, he took an unusually long time scrutinizing it, and CC'd another manager in his email reply with some very nitpicky criticisms. It felt like he was either trying to assert his authority or create a paper trail of me doing something wrong, even though I hadn't. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but it put me on edge. Also, through the grapevine, I heard a little tidbit that has me worried. One of the other managers, who was at the meeting and is friendly with my friend Laura, told her that Dave was complaining to him later about HR jumping down his throat over an innocent story, and that employees these days can't take a compliment without running to HR. When I heard that, I felt my face get hot all over again. If that's truly how Dave sees it, as him being the victim of oversensitivity, then I doubt he's learned a damn thing. It also makes me worried that he might hold this against me in the long run, consciously or unconsciously. For now, I'm doing my job and trying to move forward. I've documented everything, just in case, including saving a copy of that apology email and noting down that weird project feedback instance. HR told me to come to them if I experience any retaliation or further issues. I'm really hoping I won't have to, but I'm keeping my eyes open. Emotionally, I feel a little better than I did on the day it happened. Having my feelings heard and validated in that HR meeting did help some. But I still feel uneasy around Dave, and honestly, I still feel a lingering anger. I'm working on that in therapy. Oh yeah, I discussed this with my therapist too, who helped affirm that my feelings are valid. It's just hard to pretend everything's normal with my boss now. I'm considering asking for a transfer to a different team under a different manager if things don't improve. I haven't made any decisions yet, and I'm giving it a little time to see if things settle. I've been at this company a while, and I usually enjoy the work and my other colleagues. I don't want to throw that away if I don't have to. But I also refuse to stay in a situation that becomes toxic for me. So that's where things stand right now. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a tentative step forward, I guess. I'm grateful that HR actually responded and took action. I'm cautious about what the future holds with Dave. If anything significant happens, good or bad, I will let you guys know. I truly hope there are no more fireworks, and that he just quietly respects boundaries from now on. But given what I heard about his attitude, I'm going to remain cautiously alert. Thank you all again for caring about my situation. It's meant a lot to have an army of internet strangers backing me up. I'll update again if there's more to tell. Update 2, final. A few weeks later, I wish I could say that after the HR intervention, everything settled down and I lived happily ever after at my job. Unfortunately, that's not how things went. A lot has happened since my last update, and it culminated in a pretty dramatic turn of events, not necessarily a happy one. In the weeks following the HR meeting, the atmosphere with my boss Dave went from awkward to downright toxic. At first, it was subtle stuff. He continued to keep his distance, which was fine, but he also started excluding me from communications that I should have been part of. For example, I found out he held a brainstorming session for a project that I'm heavily involved in, and I wasn't invited. I only learned about it later from a coworker who thought I was in the loop. Small things like that kept happening, and I kept note of each one. Then came the more overt stuff. About 2 weeks after the initial incident, I got called into a surprise one-on-one meeting with Dave. He was unnaturally formal, and to my shock, he presented me with a written warning regarding professionalism. I nearly laughed in disbelief. The warning claimed I had been disrespectful in how I confronted him about the meeting incident, and that I, quote, created a disruption. He also cited that I had left work early that day when I was upset as an unapproved absence, even though I had informed HR and used sick time. It was clearly retaliatory and absurd. I told him as much. I said, "This is retaliation because I went to HR." He of course disagreed and gave a rehearsed line like, "Not at all, this is about your conduct. I understand you were upset, but the way you handled it was not professional." I refused to sign the warning document and told him I would be speaking to HR about it. And I did. I marched straight to HR after that meeting and showed Maria, the HR rep, the written warning. She looked genuinely concerned and said she'd look into it. Once again, I found myself in a meeting with HR and Dave, this time to discuss the alleged unprofessional conduct, which, to be clear, was basically me being upset that he breached my privacy. The audacity was mind-boggling. That meeting did not go well. I was angry, but tried to keep my composure. I reiterated to HR that this felt like retaliation. Dave stuck to his guns that he was justified in writing me up. He twisted events, saying that after the all-hands meeting, I had yelled at him in front of other staff. I raised my voice, yes, but it was behind closed doors except for initially telling him we needed to talk, which wasn't some public spectacle. He also said my leaving early was abrupt and left the team in the lurch. I countered every point. I told HR I had no history of any unprofessional behavior before this, and suddenly after I report him, I get a warning it was too coincidental. Maria from HR seemed to agree it was fishy, but she also seemed caught in the middle, since Dave was insisting he was just doing his managerial duty. HR said they'd review the warning and get back to us. I left that meeting feeling utterly dejected and enraged. It was clear to me that as long as Dave was my boss, he would make my life miserable for daring to call him out. The stress was affecting my sleep, my appetite, and even my grief recovery. I started having nightmares about my daughter again after that confrontation, likely because all the emotional turmoil brought everything back up. The final straw came a few days later. We had a department meeting with higher-ups present. I had been working my butt off on a proposal for a new client, something I was proud of and that our team was going to pitch. In the meeting, one of the VPs congratulated the team on the proposal and specifically started to say something like, "I know Jane put a lot of work into this." But Dave cut in and talked over the VP to redirect the conversation, not allowing the acknowledgement of my work. Then he proceeded to assign the presentation of the proposal to a coworker of mine, completely bypassing me. Presenting it would have been naturally my role since I did the most work on it. I was stunned and felt that familiar heat of anger rising. My coworker looked confused and glanced at me, because even he expected I'd be the one presenting. I don't think the higher-ups knew about the undercurrents between Dave and me, so they just went along with it, but I couldn't let it slide. When the VP left and the meeting ended, I stayed behind and asked to speak with Dave in front of the team. Probably not my most professional moment, but I was beyond caring. In a tight, shaky voice, I asked, "Why did you reassign my project presentation? We all know I was slated to do it." The room went silent. A few coworkers awkwardly pretended not to eavesdrop, but definitely did. Dave gave me this cold little smile and said, "I thought it would be better for team cohesion if someone else took the lead. Given recent events, I wasn't sure you were up for it." I cannot describe the fury that flared up inside me. That was it. The gauntlet was thrown. He was essentially publicly questioning my stability or competence as a result of his screw-up. I saw Laura in the corner of my vision give me a wide-eyed look like, oh no. She later told me she held her breath praying I wouldn't explode. But I did, in a way, a controlled explosion, let's say. I responded, loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear, team cohesion? Or your own ego, Dave? You embarrassed me in front of the whole company, and now you're punishing me for it. My voice was shaking, but I pressed on. You know damn well I'm fully capable of presenting my own work. This is petty retaliation, and we all see it. A couple of people audibly gasped or went, whoa! Dave's face went beet red. He barked, this isn't the time or place, Jane. My office, now. In this authoritative voice he probably thought was still effective. I just shook my head and said, no, I'm done. Then I grabbed my notebook and laptop, looked around at my coworkers, who were basically frozen in shock, and added, I won't work for someone who abuses their position and my trust. I quit. With that, I walked out of the conference room, heart pounding like it would burst. I was shaking, adrenaline on full blast. I went straight to my desk, threw a few personal things into my bag, and walked out. Laura followed me into the hallway, saying, wait, just take a breath, and asking if I was sure. I was in tears by that point. Angry, relieved, terrified tears. I just hugged her and said, I have to get out of here. And then I left. So, yeah, I quit on the spot. It's been a couple of days since that happened. I did send an official resignation email to HR, briefly explaining that I felt forced to resign due to a hostile environment. I also CC'd a couple of the higher-ups, and outlined a few examples of Dave's retaliatory behavior, so it's on record. For what it's worth, one of the VPs replied, apologizing for how things went and saying if I wanted to discuss further, I could reach out. I haven't responded yet. Honestly, I'm just trying to emotionally recover from all of this. It's not the triumphant victory I wish I could report. Dave is still happily employed there, as far as I know. Likely just getting a slap on the wrist, if anything. I'm now unemployed, which is scary, and I'm still processing everything that went down. It's unfair that he caused all this, and I'm the one out of a job. It feels like he won in some twisted way, but I also feel a weight off my shoulders not having to face him every day or worry about what he'll do next. My husband has been very supportive. We crunched the numbers and we can manage on his income for a little while so I can take my time to find something new, hopefully at a healthier workplace. Emotionally, I have a lot of healing to do. This whole saga ripped open my grief again and piled on new trauma from the betrayal and stress. I'm going to keep going to therapy, and I'm leaning on friends and family. Laura and a couple of other coworkers have been checking on me. They're outraged at Dave and said if HR or higher-ups ask, they'll corroborate my account of events, for whatever that's worth, now that I've quit.